Ready? Good. Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people. Please check out our agendas and our minutes and help us add to our list of ways to, really actually support Indigenous communities.
Tweaks to the consent and business agenda. I'd like to add 4C under approving payments. And I would like to add number 8 regarding CBA appointment and number 12 regarding our fiscal year 25 village budget, and number 15 park use request for May 4th, number 16 related to the Western Star truck purchase. I move that we accept both the consent and business agenda as amended.
Make a suggestion.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Announcement. So at our next meeting, we'll hear from our county legislator. And I just wanted to add a couple of announcements. So there was a plan for a party that was advertised on some social media sites, and we got some calls. I spoke with a landlord, but I think it's important to emphasize, because we discussed this at Town Down this morning with the emergency staff for police and UPD and rescue. So subsequently, I also received messages from college students reaching out who said, "Mayor, how come you don't allow parties?" And I want to emphasize that I'm a proponent of college students enjoying themselves and partying. The issue regarding that particular party is when there were versions of that party in the past, the revelers would go to Water Street Market, which they are encouraged to do, and they should roll through Water Street Market, and even some of the businesses told me that they kind of enjoyed the energy and the uniqueness of like having a bunch of college students come through Water Street Market. But the issue and the reason that the landlord was contacted is because some of the small business owners in Water Street Market didn't want to have to do what they had done in the past, which involved cleaning up puke and trashed public bathrooms. So that was the impetus behind speaking with a landlord. So I just wanted to make sure that our college community understood the thinking behind that conversation, and we encourage college community to enjoy themselves, but we also are encouraging college community to just be mindful of your neighbors and be neighborly. That's it. My other announcement is I got a call from Senator Hinchy yesterday. That was really nice to hear from the senator, because she wanted to share with us how she was able to get our request for SUNY impact aid included in the Senate's One House budget. She also shared with me that she was able to get a request for support for the Benjamin Center at SUNY New Paltz in the Senate's One House budget. And historically, the years when this when we have been successful and secured SUNY impact aid, it was because we had a senator advocating on our behalf and made sure that it got in the initial drafts, this one House budget. So our fingers are crossed that that will end up in the governor's final budget. But I just wanted to thank the senator publicly for looking out for us, because it benefits all town residents. So we have asked for $300,000 in SUNY impact aid. 200K goes to the town-wide fire department reserve fund. 50,000 goes to the town-wide police department fund. And then last year was the first year we were able to take an additional $50,000 and share it with the rescue squad. So that's it as far as announcements for me. I'm imagining we have other announcements from board members.
I have a bunch. I just wanted to piggyback also on your announcement about the partiers. And I want to publicly thank the revelers that had reached out to me for help, for better planning for the future. I really appreciate being like a trusted person in the community, and I'm all for like safe and smart and considerate partying, and even offered to help, help them figure out ways to communicate with neighbors and stuff like that in the future. So here's to partying. So Saturday, March 23rd. Thanks so much to Christina Vasquez for, really taking on revamping the beautification committee, and setting Saturday, March 23rd as the first, cleanup day for the year. So there's a sign up that's going around. It's linked in all my social media bios. It's like a long sign up genius link, so it doesn't even make sense to share it out. But myself and Rachel Ogagka and some other folks will definitely be at the Village Hall Garden spot that day, getting it ready for season. And there's other spots throughout the community that are in need of help.
Okay, so that's different than like clean sweep. Do we have any idea whether a clean sweep is taking place this year?
It's usually in April, so it just hasn't been announced yet. And CIP was involved in it for a while. Now it's the Rotary, I believe.
Yeah.
I can reach out to them.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to check on that. Usually it is in April, and then there's of course the similarly named Riverkeeper Clean Sweep, which is also in April. I'll have the date for next time and how to sign up. And I need to find a boat.
So regarding you were talking about folks looking after this front garden, that will be fantastic because it needs some love. So I was speaking with Blue today about updating the 2 benches that are there. We can replace the wood with some new wood, and then scrape the paint that's on the concrete sections of the wood. And we were also thinking it would probably make sense to remove those fences, just because it just looks just like oddly inappropriate for the front of a building. So DPW was going to take a first crack at just preparing it, so then you guys can take it a step further.
Cool. Yeah. So on that date, Rachel is going to help me kind of identify like what everything is, because I'm not so handy with that because I've never really had a yard these past 20 years. And the folks who run the Free Food Fridge, Millions of Butterflies, I've been connecting with Environmental Policy Board. So between EPB, Millions of Butterflies, and the new improved beautification committee, I have like a vision of our front garden being everything the community's always dreamed of. And we're also tackling the pocket gardens that Una Bombs had established on that day too.
I asked Blue to repaint the front door. Do we care about what color?
What color were we thinking?
Well, it's currently white. I don't know. I mean, years ago it was blue.
I liked the blue front door, but yeah.
Maybe we could just see what we have in the paint swap.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, let's just use what we've got.
Plenty of exterior paint. So
Okay.
like gray or white that we have.
Where is that paint? Is that in the closet here?
Yes,
Cool.
yes.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. And so the next thing on the like agenda for the beautification committee will be tackling together with the New Paltz Pride Coalition, the Rainbow Crosswalk, but that will be a future announcement. So lots of projects.
I
April.
don't mean to
Oh.
interrupt your announcement again,
It's
but
okay.
I did hear from Central Hudson, because you guys had reached out to them about putting power on the poles, so they
Oh, yeah.
they want to get together and talk about how that could be done. So we should have more info on
Yay.
this.
Oh, making moves. Awesome. So save the date. April 20th is the day we are celebrating Earth Day here in New Paltz on Huguenot Street. I'm really excited to have the most badass village and town joint Earth Day table. Stay tuned for more on ways to help out. Save another date. Saturday, June 1st is the annual Pride March and Festival. Please keep your eyes peeled for links to sign up to volunteer, for vendor spots and all of that. I'm currently working on like kind of reworking the forums I had created for past years and looping in different organizations to create this year's planning coalition. So far, New Paltz Pride Coalition and Hudson Valley LGBTQ Center are on board formally as co-sponsors. And it's looking pretty good that our local drag queens might be taking the lead on curating the performances in the park too. Next announcement is please join me in telling the New York Public Service Commission, PSC, that we need a Central Hudson rate reduction, not an increase. So the public is urged to weigh in on the Central Hudson rate case. And there's an easy way to submit a public comment without navigating the PSC's really annoying website. Thank you so much to Assemblymember Sarah Hanna and her team for putting together that form. It's also linked in my bio and shared socially, but it's an easy link, so I'll share it to actionnetwork.org/forms/central-hudson-intake. And again, I'll share this all out widely. I made sure Autumn has this link too, for the minutes. Thanks to the Hudson Valley One for covering when Sarah Hanna's chief staff Ben came to our meeting, because I think that helped inspire more people. Like were hitting me up on social media, asking if their comments looked good. So I think they're hearing from a lot of us now. Narcan and other harm reduction services are available anywhere in Ulster County to anyone, free of cost, thanks to Ellenville Regional Hospital's Project Rescue program. You can text ERH Rescue to 21000. Some of these harm reduction supplies include Narcan, test kits, snort kits, sex kits, stuff like that. Please save the Never Use Alone hotline. It literally saves lives. 800-484-3731. Here, New Paltz Narcan trains are always available online for anyone, in addition to the pop-up trainings that happen in person. So you can head to opioidpreventionnp.org, and there's basically a video that you watch and a form you fill out, and you get your supplies that can save lives. The free food fridge is available for everybody right outside Village Hall here at 25 Paddock Hill Ave. And donations are needed pretty much daily. Now that everybody in the community knows this resource is there, I'm so glad it's getting used. So check out the do's and don'ts over on millionsofbutterflies.org/free-food-fridge. Or if you're a Facebooker, there's a free food fridge Facebook group that you can join. Or you could reach out to us and we can link you with those do's and don'ts. It's basically just making sure we label the food. I would die if somebody put mango in something and didn't label it. So let's keep each other alive. And I think that's it for me for now.
Okay. Anything else from board members?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Very quick. This Saturday from noon to 3 is the chili cook-off contest at Water Street Market. There are 14 professional chefs, semi-professional chefs as well, competing. It's all for a good cause. It's a family of U-Pulse, the proceeds, something you don't want to miss. It's gonna be a lovely dinner. The burn ban starts on Friday, and what that means is no burning of anything really outside. If you have any questions, that goes till middle of April. Now we've had a lot of rain, leaves and brush and debris dry out very quickly, and fire can spread rapidly. So no outdoor burning. You can have a grill, for example. But if you want more information, go to New York State DEC burn ban, and you'll have all the information there. Now, the 10th annual Historic Preservation Commission's 10th annual juried art show will be on view from May 5th until June 30th at the Elting Memorial Library Steinberg Reading Room. The show features pieces depicting local and area historic landmarks, architectural details and landscapes, as well as impressions of life within a historic context, preservation's role in promoting equality and justice. The commission invites artists of all ages to submit their artworks between April 26th and May 1st at Elting Memorial Library. There's no charge for submissions, no charge for the public to see the exhibit. Winners will be announced at 2 p.m. during the festive reception on June 1st from 1 to 3 p.m. Participants can submit 3 pieces of artwork in any of all of the 3 categories, including painting, drawing, mixed media, and photography. So put that on your calendar, stop on by.
I just want to add to your announcement regarding the chili cook-off at Water Street Market. We're also going to encourage all revelers to be respectful and careful to keep the bathrooms in order. You know, we're not just singling out college students about being mindful in terms of bathrooms.
I have one more announcement.
Okay.
Sorry. Thanks to Autumn for getting the date, though. I want it on everyone's calendars so that I don't hear excuses like, oh, I'm out of town that day, because the Riverkeeper Sweep is one of the best cleanups ever. We usually, like, the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance gets out like on the water and stuff to clean it by water and by land. So save the date, Saturday, May 4th, and more details with timing and different meetup spots, like besides Sojourner Truth Park. There's usually a lot of other spots throughout like the region. So stay tuned for more. Yeah. Okay, now we're done.
Cool. Anything else, or should we jump into our, do we have any public comment? No, let's wait until, actually, are you staying for our meeting, or do you want to, kind of go early in the evening? Okay, we could probably move that up.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Yeah.
So we have a public hearing open. I believe we should triple check the wording within this proposed draft before we close the hearing and adopt the law. But we got really good feedback from Adele and Terry from the Affordable Housing Board at our last meeting.
Agreed.
So I think we're very close to closing the public hearing and adopting that change. So let's just make sure that that's on the next agenda at the top of the to-do list.
Sounds good. You know, so if anybody out there wants to give us more input to build off of Adele and Terry's awesome input, now's the time.
Okay. And then we have a resolution to undertake Government Operations Climate Action Plan and a presentation with members from our Climate Smart Task Force. Do folks want to join us at the table? Come on up.
This is going to be the presentation. I'm not sure if Steve's going to be able to pull it up. But my name is Phil Moscoso. I'm with the Climate Smart Coalition. This is basically, we're just asking to pass the initial resolution for the Government Operations Climate Action Plan. This is the first step in making kind of the foundational document for the village that's going to allow us to apply for grants and also just have an understanding of our current status in terms of greenhouse emissions, the current initiatives and things we have going on, what we want to do. And additionally, it'll act basically as a baseline that we hope to adapt and evolve over time. The resolution is the first step. Afterwards, you basically just have to figure out what group you would like to be a part of. I believe you guys have an update on the actual first meeting you had, right?
Well, the greenhouse gas.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that in a second, but basically the climate action plan is to focus on the mitigation and adaptation for climate change. So there are programs available to basically lower greenhouse gas emissions in anything except the power sector. So this could be non-motorized transportation, it could be increasing composting, but basically it's just a document we have to get started on, and we just need to sign off on the village. You guys have any questions or?
Yeah,
The initiatives really have to come from the village. And we are here to help document it, basically. For your help.
Autumn, or you're gonna. Or a good idea.
Finally me. I'm Yvonne Posey, and I'm the coordinator for the Climate Smart Task Force for the town and village of New Falls.
How did you originally get involved?
I first got involved looking at this when I moved to the village, which was only been a short time, a couple of years ago. I got these electric bills with the CCA, and I was wondering what is a CCA. And as I got more and more information on it, I mean, I almost did good solar panels because the CCA was doing such a good job of keeping my bills low. And that was the first I've ever heard of that. And I just got more and more interested in some of the climate activities. And my initial role was as a physician, and I taught, my specialty was pathology. And some of the areas of my teaching had to do with environmental pathology. And so I'm coming from the Detroit, Michigan area with the Flint water crisis and all that. Here I am. I moved here because my son moved here and his family is here.
Great.
And my daughters are here. I don't know how all my kids ended up in New York, but that's why we got.
Great to have you in the community.
I'm Izzy DeFino. So I moved into the area about 4 years ago, and I'm just on the edge of New Paltz and Highland. Like literally the border is my property. But essentially I got in touch, snooping through the internet, got in touch with Janelle, and I think actually through Holly Shader as well, learned about the group. They had a need for social media assistance. And I said, I'm willing to help with whatever you need. I don't do social media as a career, but I certainly know how to use it. So I'll jump right in.
And you've been crushing it.
Oh, thank you.
She's been a valuable asset.
Like seriously, you make it so much easier to share stuff out, like
Oh,
just to
great.
gush publicly. But
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any, any sort of like environmental related event, you just send me the info and I'll put it up somewhere.
Cool.
Dylan Moscoso. I graduated from the SUNY New Paltz this last summer. I finished with a dual degree in public relations and environmental studies with a journalism minor. I spent the summer under Jen Metzger with the Climate Corps internship, which was awesome. And ever since then, I've been trying to get a full-time job up here anywhere, which is finally coming to fruition. But I've been involved with the Climate Smart Coalition for a couple of months. I came along the same time as Yvonne because I saw the Hudson Valley One article that Janelle was going to step down just because she had to move to other stuff. But I just reached out to her, and ever since then, I've just been trying to do like any environmental thing I could kind of step my foot into. But it's great to thank you guys for having us here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see the new faces. Yvonne is here with her, expertise and experience, and we have young people who are breathing new life into, this type of stuff. Like, I mean, that's the challenge, I think,
Yeah.
with a lot of work that goes on in a community is that it's often a lot of the same faces, so it's super encouraging to see 3 brand new faces, taking charge. Thank you. So we have this, I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you also, Yvonne, in particular, for finding a new meeting date that'll work for me. Thank you.
No, we're excited to have you.
Like, it's one of my favorite groups, so being able to be there is really important, so thank you.
Be happy to have you.
Let's move our draft position statement regarding the appropriate definition of family up. Andy, if you want to join us at the table. So for several years, the village has had a definition of family. And I think what's very interesting about it is that the final sentence within the definition said that the definition is what it is. However, New York State case law is what matters most. But it felt like we really needed to, as a village board, to message to our building department and to our code enforcement officials, like how we see the spirit of the definition and how it should be applied. So we have this statement that we have on this agenda. I think it would make sense for our board to review it, and we'll put it on the next agenda, and we'll decide whether or not we want to adopt it as a board. But it's a strong statement. I think it provides very useful guidance to our building department and volunteer boards, particularly the planning board. But Alex suggested we brainstorm a bit with Andy about this topic. So you want to tell us a little bit about your background and why Alex thought it would be a good idea to include you in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, my name's Andy Eisenson. I work at an organization called the Chosen Family Law Center, where I'm the senior legal director, and I also teach LGBT advocacy law at the at Harvard Law School. And I've been practicing in family law for a few years, going on 15 years. And it's a weird topic to be teaching on because there isn't a singular legal definition of family. And there are lots of areas of law where every state does it a little differently, and different lawmaking bodies have different amounts of authority to decide what they want to do or to contradict each other or to be overruled by each other. But the question of what counts as a family is a particularly sticky one because it's one that implicates a lot of cultural understandings of what's normal and what's right and what's the correct way to have a family. And so we have this definition of family that's sort of embedded in our culture that manifests in our law, that it's, a husband and a wife and children that are biologically related to both of them, and those people living in a house together with no other people. And we have this sense, right, this enculturation that that's the traditional way to have a family, and therefore that's the natural way to have a family, and so that's the right way to have a family. And in fact, all of those things are not actually borne out by the facts. There's never been a moment in human history when that shape of family constituted the majority of families. And right now in the United States, that's actually about 18% of the families that exist. So less than a third of children in this country are living in a family that's shaped like that. So it's cool, right? Because in the same way as individuals exist in this vast universe of diversity and creativity, families do as well. But the implication of us having this one model that's embedded in our culture and that manifests through our law is that families that look different from that get basically penalized for not looking the way that those sort of hegemonically enforced norms dictate. And you'll notice if you start looking at the statistics that the families that don't conform to that model, that tends to correlate with families that are marginalized or vulnerable in other ways, right? So this is a model of family that correlates with things like heterosexuality, with wealth, with whiteness, and individuals and families that deviate from those things also tend to deviate from this family model. And so any legal action or standard that prioritizes the nuclear family model, as we usually refer to it, is one that's going to disproportionately disadvantage people who are already marginalized and vulnerable. And we know there's been a lot of research on the experiences of people in non-nuclear and diverse family structures, that there's actually a lot of stigma and disadvantage. 2/3 of people living in non-nuclear families report recent discrimination. And that's active discrimination, right? Not just the sort of passive discrimination that comes from living in a world that's made for people not like you. And of the 30% that did not report recent discrimination, 70% of those were not out. So they were keeping their family structure a secret from the people around them in order to avoid that discrimination. And that sort of institutional discrimination, it cuts across all of the fields that you would expect, including, family leave, things like foster care, assisted reproduction, adoption and parenting, healthcare and insurance. That's the one that's really kicking me in the butt right now. It's my family not being able to share health insurance has cost us so much money. Hospital visitation, when one of my family members had to go inpatient last year, I wasn't able to go and be with him in that moment. And things like housing, it also manifests in housing. So here's the good news. And this housing court case, I will talk about at every opportunity. If you end up just hanging out with me socially at any point, I will continue to talk about this case. It's called Braschi versus Stahl, which was a housing court case in 1989. So way before same-sex marriage was like anyone even was dreaming about that, right? And there was this thing that was happening. This was the height of the AIDS crisis, right? And there was this trend, this thing that was happening where two men would be living together. One of them would be sick. The other would be his life partner, would be taking care of him as he was sick. The partner who was ill would be the holder of the rent control or rent stabilized lease. When that partner would die, his partner, his caretaker, wasn't legally family for the purposes of the lease, and so in one moment would lose his partner and his housing. And all of these men were ending up, homeless because their whole life just turned upside down in 1 second. So one of these men, whose name was Miguel Braschi, he took it to court. His partner, Leslie Blanchard, died of AIDS, and he took his landlord to court and said, I should be considered family. I should be able to stay in my home. And the court issued this incredibly progressive decision that would be progressive today, and this was 89, 30, almost 40 years ago, where they looked at the daily life that these men led, right? The way that they cared for each other, the way that they bought groceries together, their shared finances, their emotional and financial interdependence, their stability in their life together, and said, as far as New York is concerned, that's what makes a family. And they said, it's about the reality of shared daily life, not, and this is a quote, legal fictions like marriage certificates and adoption orders. They said, it's about how you live. It's about what your family means to each other, right? And then 2 years ago, another housing court case in the city brought Braschi into the 21st century. This was so cool because they actually cited some writing of mine in this decision, where this judge made a similar call. She said, family is based on the reality of shared life and interdependence and what you mean to each other and how you take care of each other. for the purposes of maintaining residency in a rent-controlled lease, but this time it was for a three-partner relationship. And she wrote, why does a person have to be committed to one other person in only certain prescribed ways in order to enjoy stability in housing? Do all non-traditional relationships have to comprise or include only two primary persons? So we actually have case law in the state of New York that says that family is about how you live. And under the text of New Paltz statute, that supersedes what's actually otherwise written in the statute, right? So in the event of any conflict, the state law supersedes. And so under the case law of New York, as most recently expressed in O'Neill in 2022, the recognition of family must rest on an analysis of factors like a shared household, financial interdependence, the reality of shared daily family life, not on, in the language of the Braschi decision, legal fictions like adoption orders and marriage certificates. And I'm thinking about the Love is Love ceremony that was held here in 2004, where as an act of civil disobedience, right, this town led the way in New York State on recognition of marginalized relationship forms and the protection of the vulnerable people in those relationships. So New Paltz has a history as a sanctuary for people who, because of the way that they live, because of what their love looks like or is shaped like, can't exist in other parts of the country or of the state, including my family, right? Like we've been living here for 5 years. We've been emotionally and financially interdependent, paying bills together, cooking dinner together every night, raising a very stupid beagle, in sickness and in health for 10 years. And we can't legally marry, we can't share health insurance, we can't visit each other in the hospital, we can't adopt or foster children. And under the narrow definition of family that's being contemplated here, would not be able to live together. And so under the case law that's extant in New York and under what's really special about this town, I think adopting this position statement on the table is both legally sound and a good idea. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. I've got some cards here. If any of you have follow-up later and you want to get in touch, this is what I do all day. Is what I love to talk about. So I'm happy to talk about it with you as much as feels right.
Thank you so much, Andy. Like, when I met you at the housing picnic, like I knew I would be reaching out to you for help at some point, and I didn't realize it would be a couple years later, about this. But I think you really spelled out like some of the really important reasons why like our code is good the way it is and should remain the way it is. Deferring to the state and not considering a narrow definition of family, because it like the implications of narrowing that definition would be far beyond, anything about like tenant housing versus homeowner, and all of that. It would have implications, about like marginalized like people, and that's so far from what we want to do. So thank you for like putting that all out there. For us, I think that background is really, really important. Makes me feel good about this statement, that we're going to put to a vote next week.
I would add also that the New York State has guidance for municipalities that are trying to grapple with this question, because all lawmakers know it's a complicated one. And New York State basically says, look, we understand that the purpose of these, the zoning and the housing regulations that are around single family homes, like the purposes of those things is so that we can have neighborhoods that are safe and that aren't chaotic and that aren't jammed up with a million cars and that have enough parking for everybody. Those are reasonable things for a municipality to regulate. We can't regulate them by putting boundaries around what constitutes a family. And in fact, that would be a really indirect and goofy way to try to do that anyway. And so my suggestion would be, If the relevant lawmaking bodies here are trying to regulate things like parking and traffic, they do it by regulating things like parking and traffic rather than trying to decide which families count and which don't for the purposes of living together.
Well said. Yeah.
Any other comments from the board?
It's hard.
I wanted to share two things. I think it's really interesting and moving to listen to you about the history of this conversation and how, like, in 1989, a judge was just like, whoa, these people love each other, therefore, we need to look at this very differently. I think what's important too, and what we're trying to do is, we don't, like, love is the best, right? But also, you don't need to love who you live with, right? We're very comfortable with the idea of people sharing a space where it's considered a household. I think that's also an important aspect to what we're discussing here. Because there are so many combinations, of individuals who might live together for an infinite number of reasons, right? And maybe they hate each other, but they're awesome housemates.
Right, and
Right.
and you'll notice that none of the factors are actually about really emotion,
Yeah.
right? They're about practical interdependence.
Yeah.
And so if you're paying bills together, if you're buying groceries together, those are the things that make a family. And I know I have family members that I can't really stand. And that doesn't make us not family,
Yeah.
And so if me and my cousin Josh, who are being recorded, but if me and my hypothetical cousin that don't get along super well would be able to live together, even though we don't get along,
Yeah.
under a rule, then how is that different from me and a person to whom I am not related by blood, but get along with the same amount and am the same amount of financially entangled?
So the other point that I wanted to emphasize, because we've been wrestling with this concept of family within our village and our village board for several years. And, we've thrown this idea at our attorneys and we were like, how can we, address this idea? And I think what's interesting is, to your point, like, this concept of family is a charged one and it has a history and it, like, messes with people's biases and histories and all the rest. So I remember a bunch of years ago, I proposed to our attorney, I'm like, Will, why don't we stop using the word family and, like, instead of like a single family home, we call it a 1-unit home. Instead of a 2-family home, we call it a 2-unit home. And no multi-families, we call them multi-units. And the reason that we can't do that is because we are reliant on New York State Uniform Building Code, right? And the word family is, like, peppered throughout that. So we have to use this word, for better or worse. It's the word that we have to use. So I think that's another layer that we should just be mindful of when we think about, like, why this is a little bit hard and why we are writing this position statement to say, like, yeah, we're using this word. We're not going to jettison using the word because we're required to per New York State law, but this is how we want to think about this word.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you helped kind of set the tone for us to remember why, basically why we want to not make any moves that could have unintended consequences. If we think, we're addressing parking, trash, etc., let's address those and not touch this family concept. Yeah.
Because I think, there isn't really a way to police what counts as a family that doesn't disproportionately impact people who are otherwise vulnerable. And therefore, I think the best way to do it is to not do it and say, if you say you're a family, New Paltz believes you, which is what New Paltz has been saying since 2004.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our draft. I'm gonna propose to our board that we read about it, think about it, come back in 2 weeks with any potential items. You wanted to add
Just
something?
a question, Andy. Thanks for coming and appreciate it. Remember pretty well that case in 1989, being in the city and having friends who were deeply affected by that. I have to say, any action towards the New York State Building Code, any uniform, any kind of action in regards to that, responding to that you're aware of?
So we are currently working on the New York State Family Court Act, which seems like the step before moving towards the building code. But I do think that, the building code as it is now, more or less leaves the definition of family as it's being used
Right.
up to the individual municipalities. If we were going to try to change that at the state level, what that would mean would be taking that power back away from the municipalities, which New York State does not like to do. So I think, our strategy right now is mostly, as we were talking about, like if you're talking about parking, talk about parking, right? Our strategy is mostly to look at the ways in which these definitions actually manifest in people's actual lives and try to address those from the bottom up rather than coming from the top down. When we're looking at the Family Court Act, for example, we're talking about guidance to judges in family court cases, so that's necessarily a little more top down. But when we're talking about enforcement of building codes and zoning and stuff like that, it's necessarily really local.
Thank you, Andy.
Of course. I'm happy to give anyone a card that wants one.
Great.
Please feel free to reach out to me over the next 2 weeks as you're thinking about this. Would you mind?
Have your info.
Yeah, but it matches your
Oh, yeah, I'll take it. It's very nice.
Oh, 30 Wall. I used to work there.
It's,
It's a
we don't
beautiful
actually,
building.
I've actually never been there. We
Oh,
just
okay.
receive mail there. We get a lot of hate mail, and so we don't publicize
it's
where
Main
we
Street.
actually are.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's just, that's just a
So it's your
virtual
PO
office.
box,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have never been there. My coworker goes every couple of weeks to pick up mail.
Smart. Well, thank you for your work.
Thank you all so much. It's really a pleasure talking with you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if I can help, okay?
So the next item on our business agenda, we have the coterminous government discussion / consolidation of the town and village. So we had an RFQ, we got a couple of responses, a couple of proposals. So I've circulated that with our board members as well as the town board members. I've shared it with some other community members who enjoy reading this kind of stuff and have historically followed town and village discussions regarding consolidation. So this is just on our agenda as like a check-in. Hope to land on one of the two proposals very shortly so we can begin that work. But just wanted to see if any of our board members had questions about the proposals, thoughts to share this evening, or just wanted to make sure it was, kind of a tickler to make sure it's on all of our radar screens.
I have no questions.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next agenda item, county traffic study requests. We thought it made sense to just share both of these publicly. So there was a letter recently that the county executive office led the charge on and then asked different elected officials, including myself and folks from the university and handful of other signatures, but it was basically just asking the DOT formally to take a hard look at Route 208 because of the recent fatality, and related we shared under this same title, the county executive sent a letter regarding the mega warehouse. I think what's interesting about that letter is, like, again, it kind of focuses on traffic and impacts. So it's specific to mega warehouse, but it kind of feels similar in that it relates to traffic and road safety. But just wanted to make sure that that was available to all of us and that we were sharing that publicly. Any other comments, thoughts? Because the next agenda item is our request as a village to be named an interested party in regards to the mega warehouse project in Plattekill.
Yeah. I had mentioned this to Autumn last week, and after giving it some thought, looking at what how the community is responding to it, not only in New Paltz, but specifically up in Plattekill and up through Gardner and the like. You know, what's being planned there, we should be informed of what's happening. You know, we have an impact. There are roads that lead to where this warehouse is, and it makes sense for us to be informed as anybody else should be informed and be engaged in the conversation. The warehouse did come before the Ulster County Planning Board a couple of weeks ago. And the presenter of the plan had not a lot of answers to questions at the time. And I don't know if that person's going to come back or not, but clearly if they want to build something this large at that corner, at that intersection, there's a lot of people who are concerned. And it's not only just the truck traffic, but also the environmental concerns. Apparently there are a couple of artesian wells on site. Where does the runoff go? It also borders the Gardner. So there's a neighbor thing happening there as well, where there's great concern about the noise and pollution. And one route may take the trucks past our high school. So, and that roadway was developed for bicyclists and pedestrians by widening the shoulders and adding that level of truck traffic, which nobody seems to know exactly how many trucks per day or what types of trucks. So there's a lot of unanswered questions as to what kind of traffic that the community will be dealing with. So in short, you know, I think we just need to keep our ears to the ground, or, you know, be aware and voice our opinion, because we're very close.
So your motion is that we be asked to be named an interested
Agency.
Yeah.
A second.
Before I call the question, I just had a question for you. So a representative from this proposal presented to the county planning board,
That's right.
and it felt like they didn't have a lot of answers. Like, does this seem like one of those things where they're kind of like floating an idea before they?
Right. It doesn't seem like there's floating going on. It seems like there's some solid plans going on. The presenter could not tell who the tenant was going to be, because according to this presenter, they want to know who could be the tenant before they build, which kind of makes sense. But one would build something that's modular enough, flexible enough to accommodate a warehouse situation. And there were a couple of other questions asked by the planning board members that were answered not completely, but big concerns are, of course, the traffic, the noise, the exhaust, what are the hours of operation, traffic safety. Can there only be a left-hand turn as they leave?
They also will need variances, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
comply with existing Plattekill
Yeah.
code.
And I don't know how Plattekill really feels about all this, but from what I've read, gleaned from newspaper articles, there's not a lot of favorability in this direction. So, I mean, we all shop Amazon, we all shop online. There has to be a warehouse somewhere. And this is what seemingly the idea is. It's not being labeled a Amazon warehouse. So it's unclear as exactly what the purpose of this very large. You know,
Okay.
it's a lot of runoff.
Yeah.
All in favor of Bill's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I don't have complete answers to things. It was a presentation over a month ago, and again, there were a lot of unanswered questions, which is why I was referred back.
So the next item we discussed earlier, so we're gonna circle back. Let's take a hard look at whether we need to massage the proposed legislation before we vote on it. Moving to item 6, discussion short-term rental neighbor notification.
That's, sorry, just for discussion, at this table, an idea, and I've noticed happening, people talking about it in the county board meeting, a neighbor, friends who live outside of our community, concerned that a adjacent neighbor is basically operating a short-term rental, all legal, which is terrific. However, they were never notified that that such a permit was being issued. This creates tension, I think, between not only the community directly involved, but also with the municipality. Because we should be informing everybody about everything, which is impossible. This is an effort to possibly mitigate some of the issues that come up when short-term rental pops up in your neighborhood. So in my exhibits, there are 5 or 6 samples that there's a form, some are very simple, 5 or 6 questions. It's similar to if you are getting a building permit and you want to build a large whatever, change whatever you're doing on your property, you notify your neighbors and say, this work is going to happen. I have my building permit, it's displayed. I don't think you need to display the short-term rental on your property, but it'd be very neighborly, if you will, to let people know that, yeah, I transitioned my home into become a short-term rental. And it would be up to a board, this board. I had a conversation with Will about it, is what happens if there is complete objection to that? Would a permit be denied? So
We don't issue permits.
right, register.
No, but we don't even do that.
Like you get you do register all rentals, short-term, long-term, et cetera.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, but, okay, right, fair point, but. So
But community
within the
opposition has not
registration,
been-
no, but within the registration piece, then it feels weird that you would require registration, but then only do this notification thing if it's a short-term rental.
Well, because people do get notified, like if you change the use of a building from
Yeah, but
like
that's not,
one
that's,
to another, like, they know if it's a rental in most cases.
right, but that's a very unusual situation.
Yeah,
You don't, like, if you have a single family home and now you rent it out. If you long-term rent it, you don't have to notify your neighbors, but if you, well, you can only short-term rent it if it's your permanent residence.
yeah.
So you're connecting it to our registration law. Which I don't know, it just feels weird that you would require one type of rent,
Well, it's not, go ahead.
I think it impacts the neighborhood differently, long-term versus short-term. I think there's a difference.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, like, how do you get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to kind of answer kind of where you were going, Bill, like, what if there is community outcry? That's not something that can be addressed, like.
Right.
That's just not part of our registration process,
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of notification. So that, the municipality would say, oh, we've gotten 3 people back. They say, hey, I'm opposed to it. They've been notified.
Unless they're
Yes.
asking for a special use permit, which is rare, but we've seen happen recently.
I need to do a little bit more research, if you will, to find out, what are next steps? Like, there's Portland, I think, Eugene, Oregon.
Eugene or Bend,
Bend,
Oregon,
some-
yeah.
And a couple other communities who are, there's, as far as I know, in Essex County planning this, that there isn't this form that goes out within Ulster County to, within communities, but a lot of communities in Ulster County just sort of getting short-term rental laws on the books.
It's
I-
interesting too, because like, you know, when you reach out to Airbnb, for example, or whatever platform that's being used to be like, I want to complain about this short-term rental that's next door to me, blah, blah, blah. Their response is always like, it's your municipality, you know, like when they signed up to do the short-term rental, they clicked a box that says, I know I'm following all the laws and agree to do all of that and blah, blah, blah. Like, so they do put it back on us. So I could see, because it is something that has come up, like,
I think it's a
don't know where to
weird,
address it, though.
like thinking this through, right? Thinking of like the different iterations. So like, let's say I have a home and I have an accessory dwelling unit. I'm allowed to long-term rent that thing, or I'm allowed to short-term rent that thing. But what we're talking about here is we're only sending notifications if it's a short-term rental. That feels like kind of like a privacy thing. Like, why does anyone need to know details about the decision I made about how to use my ADU?
Yeah, I guess to me, it comes back to the impacts the neighbors. You know, if someone's there long-term, if not someone's there for a year, even 6 months, very different than coming for a week. It's the way that people treat the property. It's the, you know, are they coming to party?
But that's why we wrote our short-term rental
Right.
law the way we wrote it, is you cannot short-term rent a house. You can only short-term rent a house if it's your permanent residence. And it's for exactly the reason that you're identifying, that the property owner has it.
The impact on the business.
I mean, the permanent resident thing is certainly great, but how frequently is that the permanent resident present when a short-term rental takes place? And oftentimes, I've done a couple of Airbnbs and they're permanent residents, but they're not there. So there's that sort of whole.
What do you mean they're not there?
I get a code, I get into the house. and-
Yeah, but so they're away on vacation. Sure.
They're somewhere else. right?
Yeah, they're somewhere else. Yeah, that's how our law is written too.
Right, so.
I'm not so much talking about whether or not it makes sense to notify the neighbors. I'm talking about just procedurally, how do we enforce a
Yes.
notification process
Well,
where it's like, I'm always gonna go back to like, I'm only in support of laws that are easy, that are manageable from an enforcement perspective.
Well, there's not an enforcement component to this.
Sure, right, there is an enforcement because who's going to check to see whether this thing has been properly notified? It seems
Actually
like,
make a suggestion. Isn't this part of the point of the rental registry? Like, we really need to get
yes, yeah,
we need to get it available online
Mhm.
in a way that people can actually access
I
it
like
with all
that.
the information that's in the form. Because when, like, it's been listed in the past online, like the landlord contact info was left out, we have to have that included. Like, because that's on the form, the
Yeah.
law says
Kill two-
everything is supposed to be
kill-
registered like this. And that way, if you have a problem with the short-term rental next to you,
Mhm.
it's like you
You've been
can go
notified.
online, you've been notified, it's out there.
let's
Boom.
kill two birds with one stone.
This
and
is
make
it.
sure
We
that
have to
that
make this happen.
thing
This is like
is
why
done,
this is
because
what we wanna do.
then we are addressing like
Yeah,
this thing
and
that you, that,
make it user friendly too
Yeah, yeah.
and stuff. Like, I remember we went through, like, there's ways to map it. I actually have learned since then how to do mapping without using any fancy tools, just using Google Doc and a spreadsheet. So I could easily get the map done, share it out. Everyone's notified about everything.
yeah.
Boom.
So I think the fact that you added this to the agenda really helps, like, support why it's important that we make sure that the rental registration is done and made available.
Yeah, so do you know what the holdup is now with it?
I
Because
have
it's
no
been
idea.
just a whole process, and I have volunteers who are ready and stuff. Yeah,
Well, we have what's that?
they're just swamped.
There's one code enforcement officer for
Yeah.
everything that you guys are talking about.
No, there's not. There's not. There
Sorry,
are,
you're just sorry to recall it.
yeah, there's not. There's three people who work in the building department.
Because I have people I can bring in to
And-
the
and-
building
and
to
a
do what I did with
you
the
know,
interns back in the
We
day.
just hired someone and just began training them on performing rental registration. So, part of it is a staffing issue, getting the staff up to speed. So part of it is a timing thing.
Okay. I'll keep following up on that to get it done. Because like I have people who need volunteer hours, and like a couple classes on campus. They're down to do whatever has to happen to get the info online. I just don't know what it is, and was told it was something that had to be done in the building, and that's fine. I could oversee them.
I think if you wanted to direct the building department in terms of like, this is the info we need, this is how it should be collected so it can be shared, that would be, very useful.
Cool. Yeah, I have some planning docs. I will revive
But
those.
because I don't think our building department officials are currently thinking about like how to build this thing because, they're focused on performing inspections.
Cool. I can easily do that. Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's, more to go.
Okay, so the next item is an appointment to the zoning board of appeals. I move that we appoint Robert Lucchese to the ZBA effective June 1st, 2024. Discussion. Yeah.
We've needed more people on the ZBA for years, and I'm sure he'll do a great job.
Yeah.
He'll definitely do a great job, and one of the reasons that this is becoming a possibility is Rob just announced that he will be retiring from the police department, and I think it's an enormous loss for our community. But it's a well-deserved retirement, so.
And he's already planning his retirement day one action, DBA. I love it. This is why we love our chief.
And it's gonna be
He's not like probationary.
Amazing.
He's already signed up to be a volunteer firefighter.
We're so lucky.
he's a lifelong member, and really, we're lucky to have him as a neighbor.
Mhm.
But to your point, Stana, about needing ZBA members, I also want to take this, like, last night's ZBA meeting was a very challenging application, and the three members who are here impressed the heck out of me about trying to understand it and figure out the application. And it was cool because they all had very different opinions, but I think they were unified in their approach to like wanting to dot i's. And so I just wanted to like take this opportunity to publicly thank them for working so hard and taking their responsibility so seriously. It was really, Cody, Sean, and Noah were truly tremendous, and very hard application to figure out. And I think things will get sorted out for that applicant. So, we want to see that happen.
In my time as the liaison, I was very impressed with how hard they worked and how much due diligence they did. And
Yeah. So all in favor of appointing Rob Lucchese to the ZBA? Aye. The garage space next door, we have on our agenda here, building use conditions, rental fees.
Something new started happening and somebody from the community inquired about the use of the space.
Which group inquired about using it?
Martha,
Martha was asking after it. So
Mhm.
so that was how the topic came up. So that was just to bring this back to the table. So
Okay.
future discussion about
That's,
sealing that down.
Yeah, I think we need to think of as far as fees, you know. For instance, it's currently being used for something to retail, I would definitely have a different fee for that versus a community group.
yep.
mhm.
I don't even know what's the fee to use this space.
Yeah, that. The deal if you rent it for the year. Versus,
Yeah.
you know, if you're village versus not
Yeah.
village, et cetera.
Notice that the town increased their fees
They do. They
for use of the community center.
community center fees money.
I think maybe we could use that as a guide.
Yeah.
You know,
Does anyone want to take the lead on looking at what their fees are and what might make sense for this space next door? I mean, it's an awkward space. I've shown it to
Yeah.
many different groups. And everyone kind of is interested until they look at it closely.
Yeah.
And because it's like a cool space. It's like, it's big. The ceiling's not tall enough. The sound's terrible.
The sound
It's
is terrible.
drafty. We had all these ideas about how it could be used, and it's a tricky space. We'll continue, and there was some conversation on social media about people believing that the village was going to outfit it with playground equipment, like the space up at the Andy Murray Center in Kingston. I actually called the Buildings and Grounds Department, actually the rec department up in Kingston, to understand that program. And a huge part of why what they might be doing in Kingston is not applicable to here is, so when you call Parks Department at Kingston, the woman who I spoke with was awesome and was just so helpful in terms of explaining how it works and how she walks through on a daily basis, and how they have 13 to 14 staff who do parks maintenance, including for this space. So what they do is they move playground equipment into it each morning. They wipe it down at the end of each day. They lock it up in a closet. So what goes on in Kingston, because their budget is completely different than ours, they have millions and millions of dollars that the village of New Paltz does not have. And I was gonna write up an explanation, illustrating the completely different financial pictures. And that's why what we've always discussed is like, let's make this space available to the public if the public wants to figure out how to use it. But we are not outfitted to do programming in that garage, right? We don't have staff to do these things. Great. Okay, so that's Donna's project. So the next item on this agenda is we have plans and contract specs for the section of Prospect Street for the sidewalk on the west side, and that would go from Slate South down to approximately 5 Prospect Street. So this would be a completely new sidewalk. The specs that we've been using for all of our sidewalks, including a DOT project, would mirror the same way that sidewalks are designed and constructed by SUNY New Paltz. So you can see an example of it on Plattekill Avenue. So it's a concrete curb and then blacktop sidewalk. It's a more affordable and better way, easier to maintain. I think it makes it's a lot more pedestrian friendly.
Much less catching your toe. And-
Yeah.
Like I could text and walk
But it's
on
not as
those
nice.
sidewalks.
I beg to disagree. Has the neighbors that live in that stretch are very interested in this project and feel that the asphalt is a decent surface, that the stretch that you're talking about, there's only sections of it that need replacement, particularly when you have the bluestone involved. And that bluestone has been there for probably 100 years or so. And there's sections that definitely need replacing, have been damaged over the years. But as a surface, it's Stone Ridge recently did their main street with bluestone, meeting all the ADA requirements and whatnot, including, I think, the sections bluestone curbing. Because of
Probably
the-
granite curbing. No,
it could be granted. So I know there's really objection to using asphalt. Some of the neighbors had discussed about possibly taking on the project in sections with their own bluestone and bluestone contractors to replace those sections.
Yeah. That
Because-
ship may have sailed. We've been working on this project for years and I've never heard of this until tonight when we're authorizing making bid docs public. Outreach, I don't know, but this has been discussed publicly for years.
Has the surface been described?
I've actually walked the surface with our public works staff as well as our engineers, and I wholeheartedly disagree that there's anything salvageable. The entire sidewalk needs to be redone, regraded. It's a trip hazard. It's embarrassing. There's a lot more in terms of sidewalk design than just the surface. You have to make sure
I
that
understand the
it's-
constrictions.
okay. So we need safe, walkable sidewalks.
I totally agree, and there's options that can be exercised in addition to asphalt.
Okay.
That being either concrete, which at last I heard, the discussion was concrete. Now, we've been
There's
discussing
concrete. There's never been a discussion of concrete.
on between Slate and Main.
Never. It's always been exactly this spec that we have. It's always been. You could probably look back at 100 emails that I've shared with this board for the last 10 years. There's never been anything except the same design that the college uses on Plattekill Avenue.
Okay, can you send me those emails?
No, you can look for them. I'm not going through emails.
You've
I
sent
guarantee
them.
I've sent them to this board. I guarantee that I guarantee,
So you have or have not?
absolutely, Bill.
You've sent your emails to.
No, I have not sent emails, but if I have shared emails with this board and I've discussed projects publicly,
Okay.
that's what I've done.
And I
Right,
think
I've
that-
definitely typed it when I was deputy clerk at one point.
yeah,
You know.
and this project, as it's currently designed, will cost $250,000. To do Bluestone would double the price. So if you considered doing this amount of sidewalk for the entire village, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. So what you're, I know, and that's what's really troubling to me is that you're proposing that you want one section within the village to have some sort of special sidewalk. Even the sidewalk that we're proposing is unsustainable. We can't safely provide sidewalks because it costs so much money. So we're desperately doing the best we can with the limited resources that we have. But you want to do something else that costs twice as much money?
The lifespan of asphalt was far less than you have.
And it's much cheaper to repair and maintain. So it actually is more cost effective. And we're doing exactly the same thing that the state university does for their sidewalks.
But their sidewalks aren't in residential neighborhoods.
Plattekill Avenue is 100% a residential neighborhood. The university at New Paltz is in a residential neighborhood.
Prospect Street is a residential neighborhood. It's a different neighborhood than what you're talking about on campus.
Okay, I wholeheartedly disagree with this idea that we want to make Prospect Street some sort of special island of itself.
There's some sidewalks throughout the village.
Yeah, and they're in awful trip hazard style condition. Okay.
Well, I understand preferring the Bluestone. It's beautiful. It has historical significance. I get all of that. But the price is just, I don't see how it's possible. I don't see how it's possible.
So the idea that was floated is that some of the residents would pay to replace the Bluestone because they value their sidewalks and being host to the public sidewalk.
And I asked you whether there's a commitment, a financial commitment from those residents to offset the difference.
And this question a couple of days ago, I haven't had a chance to.
Right. So residents are going to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The cost of residents.
Bill, I got a quote from our engineer. I work on this stuff on a daily basis.
But a resident can replace this on their own. They can hire their own
Wow,
contractors.
wow. We're trying to make the sidewalks walkable. And no one has ever,
Shared concern.
no one has ever at their own expense invested in their own sidewalk in this village. I've never seen it. Okay, well,
Yeah.
we're trying to make streets safe.
And I'm all for that. There's approaches
Okay.
to making streets.
So you're proposing that so one of the things that we're trying to do here too is to get this sidewalk constructed so that we can tie it in with the sewer repair work that has to be done.
Right.
So you're proposing a new, let's hit pause. Let's like make the condition of the road be more troubling for an extended period of time while we see whether people are going to pony up hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I don't think it's going to cost hundreds of thousands.
Well, it doesn't matter what you think. Our engineer has already told me.
Private contractor is different than a municipal contract. Much different. We know that.
Okay, I've also received complaints from the neighbors who want these sidewalks updated.
Those sidewalks are probably constructed by the homeowners themselves. There's no record of that, but from what little research that there is about.
If I knew this was going to be a problem, I wish we considered a different street to make the sidewalks safer. And then the prospect, and maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should just pivot and just there's numerous streets throughout the village of New Paltz. Church Street desperately needs new sidewalks. There's numerous streets that would benefit from improved sidewalks.
Well, maybe we should head in that direction.
Okay, so all the engineering expenses that we've invested in this sidewalk, we can walk away from.
Have we not invested into Church Street?
No, we have not. Because as I said earlier, I've shared with this board before that we were going to do this sidewalk because we were going to try to tie it in with the sidewalk improvements that are north of Slate Street. we're gonna tie it in with the water project that was done, with the sewer project that was done.
And what's the status of Slate to Henry W?
The DOT continues to review the plans as they have for nearly the last decade.
Because it's tied to.
But I, I got an update from the town that the Henry W project that they hope to begin construction on. So they already received bids back, and now the DOT is reviewing those bids. So we have bid documents that are ready to share for that project. So that includes a section of Huguenot Street, a section of Church Street, and a section of Prospect Street. And that project is also supposed to tie in with the town's Henry W project.
All right, we're not gonna.
Okay, so I mean, this is disconcerting to me because I thought what we were trying to do is to make the pedestrian experience safer. And now we're going to see whether someone.
I think that's, as I've said, it's a shared concern. We want people to be safe as well. I think all the residents, I don't think anybody on that street who's affected by this thinks differently. It's just a matter of the material.
Yep, and this has been discussed for years, and I'm not. I mean, if if you really want me to take time out of my day to go find those emails, I could. But I'm really troubled by the suggestion that, like, this has been discussed for an extended period of time, years.
I think the difference is, I recall at one point being discussed as being concrete.
No,
Never been.
No,
never-
no.
Always ask.
Zero, never, ever, ever, ever. It has been blacktop with a concrete curb since we saw how they did it on Plattekill for the university. And that has been the same design standard that will be used for the DOT sections.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we, that's exactly what we have planned. So, right. And I have numerous emails from.
Let's call it concrete, like the construction, because it's like the concrete is the curve.
Yeah.
The asphalt's the walk. So that could be the thing that led to confusion or something. But the way like the bid docs are all like drawn up, like all the work that went towards that, like that's the material like that bidders will be.
Right, I understand. I think what would be helpful to this discussion and to the situation is maybe we revisit this next year meeting and have a discussion with the community members who were most affected by it. Because clearly they were aware, and certainly maybe they should have been, maybe they've been aware for years. And I think the conversation is.
Yeah.
Well,
And maybe we should just look at sidewalks on South Oakwood or North Oakwood or Grove Street or Mill Rock or Harrington or the numerous other streets that would benefit from an improved sidewalk.
Sure, absolutely should.
And then, we could tell Jerry Benjamin, who's been asking me for a sidewalk improvement, that he should pay for his own.
I don't know those positions.
And then like, I mean, I've never heard of this, but who knows, but maybe your neighbors, if they're really passionate about this, could find models of some sort of, partnership where a neighborhood takes
Yeah.
on the construction of a public.
Yeah, there's
Pathway.
actually some historical photographs. I wonder if I haven't seen them.
I mean, like
They show-
contemporary,
Yeah.
contemporary, like examples, like of how that would actually work. That would be
Yeah.
so much more useful to figure out, because it's like, could we even give the process up to the community in that way, you know, like I don't
Sure,
even
anyone,
know.
they can, a homeowner can replace the sidewalk in front of their home. They can do that. They have to just show right. So if you're walking on Prospect Street, you should continue to expect that you have to walk in the street if you don't want to trip.
I think people walk in on the street because it's an easier way to go from.
So then why are we doing this at all? Why are we doing the sidewalk?
That's the question. Clearly, there's sidewalk that needs replacing. It's just the material. What would fit that particular neighborhood best?
Right, and we're gonna have like different materials for different streets.
We've been doing that for quite some time.
Right, and what we're trying to do is to make an effort to
Unified.
improve the pedestrian experience for the entire village.
And, you know, in neighborhoods that I've traveled, you know, throughout this country, there are plenty of neighborhoods that have mixed materials in it.
All right, parking meter zones. So wait, what are we doing here? We're not gonna do sidewalks on Prospect Street?
I think we should have a discussion with those people most of the time.
Does anybody else feel strongly about this? Because if it's just you, Bill, I mean, I feel like at this table, I feel like this is particular for you because it's the block you live on.
Right.
And I understand we all, you know, have particular thoughts and feelings about, you know, our, you know, what's close to our home. But if this is something, which it is, that we've been talking about now for a very long time, and, you know, we're trying to get bids for, like, we've been talking about this for, like, I don't understand why you're bringing this up now, why you didn't bring it up previous to this, when we have, I mean, the emails have been going on, I feel like for a year at least.
August 22nd is on the front page of the bid doc.
So,
Revised November 2023, revised again March 2024.
okay, so I personally feel like a lot of time and effort and money has gone into preparing for this. I would like to see if anybody else on the board would like to vote on it or not. How does everybody else feel? Because I could vote.
I'm perfectly okay. If Bill's saying that his neighbors want to come up with $250,000, he should go back to his neighborhood and ask his neighbors.
Okay, and then what other roads could we line up sidewalks with?
Then you gotta start from scratch and they have to be redesigned and, you know, it's like, you know, I walked every inch of this with the engineer and the public works on a couple of different occasions to get the design right. And,
That's what upsets me, is that so much work has been put in, and now we're taking it off. That's all. I wish this had been floated 6 months ago, this idea of doing this late. That's it.
right, but I'm completely against paying a premium for slate. It's completely unsustainable. I mean, the problem with sidewalk infrastructure across this entire country is like no one can afford to replace what we have.
Mhm.
Well, if we hit pause for until next meeting, does it throw
Okay.
any timelines off? I was looking for that in the doc, but it's hard to do.
It just
on
may,
the go.
right, what will likely happen is that, the sewer work on Prospect will commence, and then we won't do the final blacktop until if and when we do a sidewalk project. So it'll be,
Right, if-
you know,
if
a
we're
rough
just
road for an extended period of time.
We're just looking at 2 more weeks, not fun.
Yeah, if it's just, I would like to
Yeah,
have a
but we
decision
never
at our
see
next
anybody
meeting,
doing
but
that.
I like, you know, if there's neighbors that wanna weigh in and stuff, you know, and it won't throw timelines off, then I would be okay hitting pause till next meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, parking meter zone. What's that?
That reach out to whenever, let us know.
Parking meter zones, so there's an inconsistency with the way the parking meter zone is around Hasbrook. I think it would make sense to have the entire perimeter to have, if there's a meter, because the west side of Hasbrook Park, it's just 2-hour parking, so it's free. But then the sections where the meter or app only is required, that I feel would make sense if it was uniform and that it was free on weekends, and then, the 8 to 8 hours, Monday through Friday for the whole area, as opposed to having that northern section on Hasbrook Ave and Hasbrook Park with a different rule. But it made me think we should probably have someone proofread this entire section of code and make sure there's not other inconsistencies while we're going in there. Does anyone want to read the code? Cool. Okay. See if you can identify any other inconsistencies, because if we're going to take a bite at this apple of correcting it, let's do it all in one fell swoop. So the next item is the scheduling of the public hearing on our tentative budget. I motion that we schedule the public hearing for the 10th of April at 7 p.m.
Is that a village board meeting time? Or is this a separate?
No, it's regular village board, isn't it?
Okay, just double checking.
Yeah, just part of a regular
Yeah,
village board
yeah,
meeting.
okay.
So we have our tentative budget. It's for the 9th year. It's a no increase to the tax rate. It's not a whole lot different than, what we do every year. We fixate on looking at what our expenses could be and making sure that our revenue can pay for those expenses. So, we have revenue from property taxes, which is, when we talk about the tax rate increase, that's what we're talking about. But then we source revenue from a variety of other things to pay for, to meet these expenses within the general fund. But this budget includes both the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. Where did I add it? Oh, I guess because I moved this up near parking because I also wanted to respond publicly to this idea about New Paltz moving to free parking. Like people bellyache about having to pay meters or mobile phone apps or getting overtime tickets, and no one wants an overtime ticket. No one wants our staff to have to deal with people who are upset about getting overtime tickets. It's a daily thing that they have to endure. But the reason, and we've said this hundreds of times, is that the reason that local government is involved in parking enforcement is to support businesses, and it's to support the rotation of spots. I think a really valuable piece of data came from former bakery owner David Satnar when he wrote a letter to the newspaper in May of 2019, and he explained how when the village moved to parking enforcement on Sunday afternoons from 1 to 6, he actually saw his sales increase and improve versus previous years' Sundays when there was no parking enforcement on Sundays because cars could just sit there all day, and that's generally what happens when you don't have enforcement. He said there was one caveat where during that fall stretch of 2018 where his sales did not improve when he compared it to previous years, and it occurred during Christmas week when the meters were bagged. So again, you bag the meters, you don't do enforcement, cars don't move, businesses suffer. But some individuals on social media have proposed, well, the village should just pivot and move to 2 or 4 hour parking. But then that would still require the same amount of staff to go and monitor cars and make sure that they're moving after 2 hours. And then it would require the same amount of staff to handle overtime tickets, handle complaints, all the related issues. So what you would see within the general fund, which we just talked about, is that the expenses related to parking would stay exactly the same. And then I just penciled in, I'm suggesting that we would take a haircut to our revenues from parking meters and overtime tickets and mobile phone apps in the neighborhood of about 85%. So if you gave an 85% haircut, that'd be worth about $400,000 that our general fund would no longer benefit from. So the idea has always been you offset the expenses with the revenues. So when you eliminate the revenues, then the property tax rate would increase. It would increase. So folks, property taxes would go up by 29%.
That's great.
So free parking means raise taxes by
It would
nearly
cost
a third.
everybody a heck of a lot more than paying for parking, they can pay for $1 parking.
Yeah, you know, and like as someone who currently doesn't have a car, I wouldn't really want to be paying more in rent,
Okay.
like for everybody else that parks in front of my apartment where I don't have parking, it's meter parking. If I did have a car again, which I will soon, you know, and there was not meter parking on Main Street, you betcha I'd park and never move, you know, except for on days I have to leave town, which I try to avoid as much as possible.
Any report in terms of ticketing has gone down since the addition we had?
The revenues are slightly up. They're not as up as much as we would have imagined. But you know, what's challenging about the last 4 years is we don't really have a good data set because in 20 and 21, like parking revenues basically were eviscerated. And then even we budgeted for and received a whole lot less parking, you know, so even like compared to those years, we're kind of returning to how much revenue was generated from coins and overtime tickets in like 2018, 2019.
So I would imagine that our ticket revenue is somewhat less as a result of these meters, because people can just, you know, up their hour off their phones, so.
We could take a closer look at that, but my gut is saying that there's not that much difference. Yeah, there might be a slight uptick in revenue because the app is easier to use. And also because you can't share an expense, right? So Stevie puts in a quarter, Stevie's only there for 2 minutes, and then I roll up and I'm like, oh, I can still use the rest of Stevie's quarter. Like that phenomenon goes away.
Do you know how many users have the app?
I don't know.
We had that conversation.
Yeah, I think the penetration's been pretty good.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, you know, how that's affected in terms of ticket writing and the complaints that we get about, you know.
If you want to dive into that stuff, Roseanne and Nancy,
Okay.
yeah, they could probably get you slices of data, look at it from a few different angles. Okay, so did I call the question for scheduling the public hearing?
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
I already did that?
Yeah.
Okay. Schedule public hearing for Restore New York Round 8, the property assessment list for the Ann Oliver House at 5 Broadhead. I move that we schedule this public hearing. Would this also be April 10th? Okay,
No, actually. Please,
all in favor? Aye. And then the next item is, we received a formal request from Peter Sevago for a refund of $954 for past water bills. For use at 101 Main Street. So I reviewed this with Roseanne and Nancy. We looked carefully about when the requests were made. I mean, this is pretty standard stuff in that the water was used. It doesn't work when someone says, but I didn't have a leak. Like the water went through your meter. Our meters only underread when they're failing, they don't overread. So I'm suggesting that we deny this request for a refund.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we have a request for some individuals interested in using the park on May 4th from noon to 5 for the May Day Housing Speak Out. They're requesting a waiver for fees and insurance and the refundable deposit. I mean, this is kind of a grassroots effort.
Yeah.
Alex is going to be involved. I feel like this is more of like a
Unity
public
deliver.
gathering, free speech, less of an event-like situation. So
Unity
I kind of-
delivered is just Marissa. Yeah.
I kind of interpreted this as someone interested in doing something that feels formal in the park, and they're giving a very courteous heads up that, hey, I'm going to be in the park. But it's kind of not that different, not to pick on Stevie again, but if Stevie was like, hey, I'm going to have a birthday party in the park and invite a handful of friends,
Yeah.
you could tell us as the village, like, I'm going to be in the park. Do I need a permit? And like, no, we don't need to get that crazy about permitting each and everything. So this feels more similar to kind of an organic, simple, easy to wrap your head around gathering.
Yeah, and I think Marissa also, wanted to just put it on everyone's radar too,
Yes, right.
like that, like, we're gonna basically hang out in the park, on the first Saturday after May Day and talk about housing.
So this was Marissa's creative way to get
Yeah.
the board to discuss a conversation and to hopefully get
Yeah,
public awareness.
that's exactly it.
Very, very clever.
So yeah, I'll motion to approve those requests or.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then the next item is, so Senator Hinchy provided us with a grant to buy a new, more energy efficient Western Star truck. The distributor for this truck is taking a very long time, and now we're very fearful that the truck might not be available until the first quarter of 2025. Joey Graneri from our Public Works has been seeing whether there are other possibilities to secure the same type of truck from someone else, and he identified a firm in New Jersey, and it seems like there is an opportunity to purchase the truck through them, and then to also purchase the truck using a cooperative pricing scheme. And we're involved in other, like Sourcewell is a co-op that we're involved in, and this is very similar. This one's called Education Services Commission of New Jersey. I shared the resolution for membership and the participation agreement with Will. I move that we go ahead and approve both of those, so we become members. So this is not us deciding that we're automatically buying a truck through these guys, but at least like moving in that direction, that we could become a member, which is free. And it was explained to me that other municipalities in New York State are also members of this New Jersey co-op.
Okay.
All in favor? I move bills and claims. All in favor? Aye. I provided a ZBA liaison update. Our ZBA members did a great job looking closely at the request to consider an interpretation at 181 Huguenot Street as to whether or not it's a home occupation. And I think they're very comfortable with, trying to figure out how that that organization can continue to operate, but it just has to be in a way that works with our village code. And it was like very interesting conversation, and I think that they've kind of identified some paths, and I'm optimistic that will all get sorted out. So that's my CBA liaison update. Want to do any questions about that stuff?
I can do a couple of things. Also, County Planning Board met about a week ago, and Autumn, did you get? We discussed the 11 Water Street. They haven't released require mods and whatnot, so we're waiting for that. Dennis Doyle, the director of Ulster County Planning, he's being awarded from the New York Planning Federation, a very prestigious award called the Hessenbutel Award for Planning Excellence, recognizing his many years of service to Ulster County and to the planning profession. That's a thing he received. Let me switch back to our own planning board. Our own planning board looked at 5 and 7 Prospect Street. There seems to be ongoing concern about, not so much about 5, but 7 Prospect Street, which is there's a proposal to build an addition to the house, raise a barn that's in the rear. The applicant and his architects have come up with a different parking plan, which seemed to be a bit more agreeable to those interested. And that will be continued to be examined. There's still a great deal of concern about water runoff from that property onto the adjacent property, which then goes to another property. And wondering whether or not it is something that's going to be will fit into that particular site. But that's been talked about for about pretty close to 6 months now. Beyond that, I can't recall if there was anything else. I think
The Wells Fargo building.
Oh, right. Wells Fargo.
John Goonan's project.
Right, that came up, and apparently there's plans for the Wells Fargo building to be part gymnasium, fitness center, and part bank. And there's concerns about when people park, because parking is limited in that area. So that's being discussed by planning.
Well, my take on that conversation is that that property is uniquely positioned because it actually has lots of parking. And I thought the interesting thing about what the applicant was asking for is that he wanted to pave over that green space where there are currently picnic tables. And it felt like the planning board was struggling with that as an update to a site plan. Just seems like I hope that they stick with that, because if there is already ample parking at that property, the reason that people love New Paltz is that we have this walkable Main Street. We have features like that area where people can sit. If you want really awesome parking, the Hudson Valley Mall has really good parking. It also has really great views of the Catskills. I'm not kidding. It's really like one of the most impressive views in Ulster County, and the parking is ample. So I don't think that should be the the priority of any project.
Right, owns the parking lot next to Rock and Snow, is that Rock and Snow's parking?
No,
lot?
that's part of this project,
Right.
is that
I didn't
that
understand that.
is parking that would be available for this use.
Right.
As well as all the parking behind the
right.
bank. It's kind of like I said, it's a unique parcel and that it has a lot of parking.
And there's also some discussion about the apartment that's below.
Oh, right,
Below the liquor store.
or the space below the liquor store, because the applicant is interested in renovating it and making it apartments.
Right.
And it's a weird thing because like, what's the ground floor? What's the basement? You know, does it comply with zoning? You know, it definitely feels like a unique situation. So our planning board will have to probably do something similar to what the ZBA did last night, like, you know, really wrap their heads around kind of a hard to understand.
And I think there is still interest from the bank to have drive-throughs remain.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether Wells Fargo will continue to have their drive-through or whether the new financial institution will need a drive-through. But yeah, it seems like, and we've heard from this landlord for some time, like he's talked to a number of prospective tenants. I've also heard rumblings that another cannabis dispensary might be interested in that space. And I'm throwing this out to this board because what I don't understand is, you know, we know that for a population with fewer than 20,000 people, you have that 2,000 foot rule between dispensaries. I don't know how that works with the distance between a dispensary and a micro business, because the Office of, or the Cannabis Control Board granted a license to the former, or soon to be former Blueberry shop at 3 Water Street. So how could they even have a micro business within 2,000 feet of a dispensary? I do not know.
I don't know.
Because a micro business is kind of like a dispensary. I think the difference is that it has an affiliation with a farm. But the description I read for that micro business project is it's also feels somewhat like a lounge. But these are probably things that the planning board will have to look at for that particular site, but then I don't know how that will work as far as the Cannabis Control Board and whether or not they want to issue another license within 2,000 feet of a spot where they already issued a license. Did you want to go into exec session?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to just state the reason and then we can do that?
To discuss the personnel.
Okay.
Second.
You know, but I got the motion.